Me today is Brandon Fougnies, better known from Strict Vision Athletics. Welcome, Brandon.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Rob.
I've been following you for a while, and much like some other followers, your gym is hard to miss. Like, if I'm scrolling, it just pops. Everything about your gym just pops, and I'm sure it's that way live in person. So that's what I want to get into on this episode is your facility, your gym, but also just your personal strength history, because that's the name of the game here on Home Gym History.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah,
Cool, man.
do
So
it.
if someone hasn't seen Strict Vision Athletics, if you just bump into someone at the supermarket like, hey, Brandon, nice to meet you. What do you do for a living? How do you describe it?
Really and truly, I do my best not to. When I meet people for the first time, rather than if I'm in a rush and I kind of just want to brush off the question, then I'll just say I'm a gym owner, and they'll be like, oh, cool, which one? And then usually I'll have to go around doing this anyway. But if it is somebody that I really have a vested interest and want to really show what I do, I will usually either I'll have them pull up Instagram and I'll show them that way, or I'll just pull out a video and show them myself so that they get a bit more. It's so visual, it's hard to describe with words. So having something to actually physically show somebody goes a lot longer than trying to describe it just verbatim.
Sure. The way I put it into words, one of my children asked me like, "Oh, who's on your podcast today, Dad?" I said, "Well, it's this guy. He's a strength coach, trainer. He's got like a bunch of certifications and things. But his gym, imagine like floor to ceiling superheroes." And their eyes just opened. They were like, "What?" They're like, "You don't have that many superheroes in your gym." I'm like, well, "I'm working on it, kid. So we'll see." So what's the origin of that? You just always love it since you were a kid or something? Like,
Oh
what's...
yeah, yeah. I loved comics. I loved superheroes. I loved comics, superheroes, and science as a kid. That's what I found sports early on, but I didn't love sports early on. I played them because my family was very active early on. From the time I could walk, my dad was a high level athlete. All my siblings actually played. My two of my siblings played college athletics. I
Oh,
never
nice.
never got to that level. I never took sports as far as I could, but I did latch on to strength training. But the origin to your question directly, the origin of the comic book theme, that was something I loved from the time I was 6, 7, 8 years old. I before I was doing sports, I was painting models. I was studying science. I liked science, and I was reading comics. And that's really what I wanted to take. What I wanted to take from that was some sort of a brand recognition that could be synonymous with something fun. And when this first began, we're about 9 years old. When it first began, it didn't start off as the superhero gym or have any of the branding that it has now. I started it simply as a home facility for myself while I was still I was training up with the NFL at the time. I had my own home gym just for me, but I didn't want a dungeon. It felt like every single home gym was like dark, and it was maybe black, maybe red if you were lucky, but it was like dark colors, very dungeony, and I
Yeah.
didn't want that. I wanted it to be like really bright and really flamboyant and just really not even for Instagram. It was just personally for me. It's just that's kind of how and who I am. But once I grew and once I partnered, certainly when I partnered with my brother and had a few more team members come on, he was the one that really told me, this is already pretty unique. I think that we should lean into this. I think that branding it this way will do two things. First of all, it will certainly set a unique tone to your facility. And B, your branding will never go away. Marvel movies, and this was
Yeah.
even, this conversation was, I want to say, maybe Iron Man 1 had been out, maybe, but it
Oh.
was at least 6 years ago. So probably a couple Iron Man movies had dropped. The MCU had not gone through what it has today. But we've
Mm.
quickly realized that, there's the new Deadpool film coming out. Well, me and my other coach are going to dress up. We're going to go to the theater. We're going to shoot the content and go dressed as
Amazing.
that, and
Yeah.
hopefully do some interactions with fans or something like that. So our branding allows us to be relevant consistently and hit different demographics of individuals. I I dance around with the title of either coach or artist, I suppose, with what it
Yeah.
is that I do. That's the other part of it. I mean, the I've been a painter since I was a little kid as well. Since I was about 6 or 7 years old, I was painting models,
Mhm.
painting murals, doing all that type of stuff, painting comics, making my own comics. That's what I
Yeah.
really liked doing when I was a little kid. And I just liked it because I thought it was fun. And the funny thing is about this particular branding is that I wasn't alone. There's a lot of people in our
Oh,
generation that grew up thinking, hey, comics are fun, man. It's awesome. And now we're
I
all
read
adults.
comics. I still do. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Now they're
I
all in
still
their
do at
30s and 40s.
times. Yeah. I was just watching Sweet Tooth, the new season last night, based on a comic because I like the comic Sweet Tooth. So yeah, I mean, I, I read all kinds of comics, and growing up, that strength connection though, I can see where that comes from. And there are some people that maybe have like a custom deadlift platform, or maybe there's like a banner or something on the wall, but
Mm.
nothing to the extent that you have it, where you've put in so much. Just and it's the customization of the pieces in your gym plus what you just said. You mentioned briefly, but I really want to highlight it, the artistry of the modeling that you do. You'll post a reel every once in a while on your account of something that you're painting, and I'm like, holy crap, like this is a detailed effort here. Is that something that is kind of a yin yang situation with strength training that
Mm.
then you can relax a little bit and do a model?
Oh, 100%. I I've really come to appreciate the balance of energy in my life, and what's really helped me, being born with the personality that I had, being born with I was I mean they wanted me on ADD medication. I was very hyperactive as a child. I had a very untamed, very out of control imagination. I had difficulty listening to teachers. I didn't have difficulty in school because if I enjoyed the subject. If I enjoyed the subject
Mm-hmm.
matter, I really wouldn't have a problem passing classes or even getting really good grades in classes. But as far as my interests went, if it didn't hold my attention, then I had no interest in learning about it. And when it comes to sort of the yin and yang, as you put it, between strength coaching or artistry, painting, any of that sort of stuff, it is sort of the counterbalance to the intensity that I have to bring. And I try to even I find that I find my best balance if I work with a client, maybe paint for 20 minutes, go back and work with a client, go back and
Mm.
paint for another 20 minutes, because it allows me to sort of reset and refresh my brain and allows me to tap into the energy of each individual client, especially if that client needs a very high and very high energy experience, and some of my clients
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
Those are the clients where I have to really pour into that, and I really have to give of my energy to that person. Well, going into a setting where I'm going to paint a wall or create something that is much more, left brain, that allows me to sort of reset and charge myself. And that's how I find balance. That's how I find balance in my life.
It makes sense to me, and it connects to what you were saying before about designing your facility to represent you, this vibrant, kind of fun atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Strength training inherently is difficult. That's the name of the game, but it doesn't have to be miserable.
Exactly.
And sometimes you're right, there is this sort of attitude of like misery, of like, oh, this black doom and gloom and dark colored dingy basement kind of vibe, if you will. And hey, if that's what does it for you, that's what does it for you. I respect anyone who's making themselves better, but for me, I connected personally with what I saw in your gym. I really like that, and it makes me think of a relationship with strength and the superheroes that you embody. So when it comes to some of those real world strength athletes, though, you briefly mentioned the NFL, and you were involved. Were you a strength coach, strength trainer with the NFL? What was your involvement there?
I had several different. I started as an intern. We had a family friend who trained with a man. His name's Ian Danny. He trains in Scottsdale. He owns Performance Enhancement Professionals. We had a family friend trained with him briefly during his time with the combine, and so he at the time I was only 16. He
Hmm.
went to Ian and said, "Hey, listen, this kid. He's really bright. He's already studying this stuff, and he wants to do something in this world. We don't exactly know what yet." But he would love to come and intern with you. He'll do the laundry, clean the bathrooms, just get him in, and if you can, because this was a closed facility. This was not a place where anybody could come, much less a 16-year-old non-NFL player. I didn't even play football. I went to a little tiny 2A school. We didn't have football. We
Yeah.
had soccer, we had wrestling, we had track. We did not have tackle football. So I've never played competitive full contact tackle football. But I knew strength training and I knew weightlifting because of my time in wrestling and my father and what I had studied on my own at that point was very minimal. But I had a decent understanding on it, or so I thought, until I got to Ian's. But I got in very early on, and I tell people as well whenever I'm talking to trainers or coaches who are trying to navigate especially the beginnings of their careers, and they ask me these types of questions. I tell them I never trained in a public gym. I've never was a EOS coach or a Lifetime Fitness. I never did any of that. I trained at Ian's place for 4 years. During my time when I was studying kinesiology at Westmont, I would come back. I would do my summer internships there. I also paid him to be a client trained by one of his coaches. So I went in and actually, worked, took my money, because at the time in college, I mean, I only had to make enough money to really pay for coaching. Everything else was subsidized by my parents, food, rent, everything was pretty much free back then. It was nice.
In addition to just the physicality and training and being a client, you're also seeing the other side of it, which was probably helpful at the time.
I'm learning from the coaches as a client. I am getting to shadow the coach as an intern. And so I'm spending, I mean, there were summers where I would spend 6 to 8 hours at that facility, like without leaving. Going back, and I would have spent more time. Frankly, I would probably go back and do it again. But it was an invaluable start for me to see not only how the top tier athlete trains and works and how to program for them and how they but also seeing, like, what does it actually take to operate a facility at that level? I did the maintenance on the machines with the maintenance guy. Like I said, I cleaned the toilets. I did everything. I saw exactly how the top 1% of all athletes in the world and what it takes to train them. And that gave me the idea to start something like that, but for the general population, because it quickly sets in when you're in that environment that, wow, there are no facilities like this. Everyone is doing this wrong. Everyone. And there's really only a few. There are only even today, I would say there are 4 strength and conditioning coaches that I can name that are on the same level as Ian. What he's doing, and this guy, he's been on Mark Bell 2 or 3 times. He's Coverman's Fitness. He's done his accolades speak for themselves in this industry, and being able to train with him for 4 years without stopping was a wonderful start for me as a new person to the industry.
So then, if I go down the street and I just walk into a commercial gym, just a national chain type of place, you know, versus going to a private gym, kind of like you're describing here, I'm sure you could put on a master class of, a whole semester's worth of, lectures on it. But boiling it down to this quick interview that we're having here, could you pick out an example of a main difference you're going to get out of, private studio, private gym?
It would depend on which one, but speaking broadly, the difference between a public gym, this is very hard because honestly, there aren't many private gyms. There aren't many private gyms really at all. I can only think of a couple.
You were speaking just now about how, like, seeing all of that was just so different for you. So that's what I'm just curious, because I haven't seen that. So,
I would rephrase it, and I would call it perhaps public gym training versus elite training. There are facilities out there that will have very high-end coaches. There's a place out here called Exos that is open to the public. You just have to work with one of their coaches, pay $200 an hour, and you can come in and do it.
Gotcha.
Very, very few and far between. A good measurement, I think people, to answer your question in a roundabout way, a good measurement people can look for if they are considering working with someone in a gym of some kind is finding out if that person does that person have their name on the front cover of that gym. If the trainer has his name on the front cover of that gym, that's going to be a big, big difference of experience going into that facility versus going into a public place. A public
Okay.
place is a fine means to an end if you have the knowledge on how to do your training. Every time I go on vacation, I'll go into a public gym and I'll
Oh,
get my
yeah.
workouts done. It's not a problem. But if you're somebody who doesn't really know what you're doing, maybe you think you've known what you're doing and tried, and you're still not getting what it is that you want, really and truly do consider getting yourself a coach. This is like anything
Yeah.
else. Everything is for sale, and it's also a get what you pay for industry.
Mm-hmm.
You may not even get the results you want getting a coach at that public facility, but if you find a coach whose name is on the front banner of his facility, you know that's a career man or woman. You know that they are invested in their business, and they are going to be invested in you, because to them you are what they are doing full time. It is their full time job. Their name is on the front cover of that building, and they have to produce results for their people. You don't have to produce results for anyone if you're a Lifetime Fitness coach. You're in there. You're an employee, and you're not a well-paid employee either. It's just a real tough industry to be in if you're somebody who's trying to do it in the public space.
That's great advice. I mean, someone who has a horse in the race, someone, with a stake in the success of the business, intrinsically would care a lot more.
And they're liable. It's not even they're liable if you get hurt. They're liable for your results. If they train you for 6 months and you don't get something out of it, and you go tell people, they're not hard to find. They know their name's on the front of that building, and people can come get you. That's why it's so important to be. You want to have a backdrop of solid education and knowledge when it comes to doing this. The branding is fine, but you need to make sure that you are not a gimmick, that you're not doing this for the wrong reasons, and that you need to have the skill set that can only be attained through learning, education, and hundreds and hundreds of hours spent learning from someone a lot better and smarter than you are.
That makes sense to me, because I see, just even on your content, you'll reference other people. Just today, I saw that you referenced Matt Wenning. You were doing some work, doing some different things in terms of movement. And, you're picking up knowledge wherever you can. Why not, if it's solid stuff? So when it comes to, wrapping this all together, you've got this obsession with superheroes, and I mean that in a compliment. And you've got this knowledge, you've masters in exercise science, these experiences of yours. You start your facility, it takes off. Your brother encourages you, hey, we need to double down on the superhero theme. Where do you see some of the connections? I mean, when I think about superheroes, getting away from actual real life humans, the NFL athletes that you're working with, when I think of superheroes, I see a clear divide. There's the ones that just were kind of gifted the strength, and there's the ones that have earned the strength. They've done something to get the strength. That's why Batman was always kind of my favorite. Now, he was a rich boy. I get it. He had privileges in life. But he didn't, drink a serum. He didn't, get that strength without any hard work involved. So, do you ever go deep down a wormhole thinking about these superheroes while you're doing cardio or something and lose yourself in it? What's your favorite, if you will? Do you have a favorite? Or are you just one of those guys that likes it all?
Oh, yeah. Well, I always, back when I was really reading the comics, I always loved the X-Men comics. I loved Wolverine. The character of Wolverine is probably still through and through my favorite. I just think his story arc is so good. All his background stuff, the tragedy. His life is basically a giant Greek tragedy. That's basically what Wolverine's entire story really is. I always had my favorites aside from that. Later in life, I definitely drew a lot of my enjoyment from Deadpool. I think, as an adult, I enjoy Deadpool. As a younger person, I enjoyed Wolverine. And now they both coming together into a film, which is outstanding. But
your dream come true.
Oh, it's going to be great. I'm pretty excited for it. I agree with what you're saying. I think that, first of all, to your to your comment on the NFL guys, when I think of athletes, that's the word superhero does not even come into my mind, because it's most of them, not all of them, but most of them fall into the category of those superheroes you mentioned that sort of drank the serum, or they were gifted something. It's very true when it comes to high level athletes. Now, not taking anything away from the hard work they must put in to perform at that level, and a lot of them really are like that. I got the pleasure. Tim Tebow was one of the guys at the facility when I was
Oh,
there. I got
nice.
to work with him. He's an amazing person, and he's gone on to do his journey didn't even take off until he got out of football. Once he got out of football and got out of sports, now Tim Tebow gets to show who he really is. But
Yeah.
the physicality is not the part of that I would really latch onto if I were to say, oh, that's a hero. That's somebody who does. No, that's, to me, when you meet some of these guys that just, they don't want to put in the work. They don't need to put in the work, is the blatant truth about it. So many of those guys do not have to work as hard as you think they need to. They are incredibly gifted. They have a genetic code inside of them that less than a fraction of 1% of human beings will ever touch, will ever have. And they will have that whether they work hard or not. So that piece right there, genetics is the biggest factor on who will play at a high level sport, not just the NFL, anything. It's almost certainly that. And then from that pool of less than 1%, then you will find the hard workers, the guys that consistently train year round, that take this very seriously, that enjoy training. That's a big thing. Just like other people outside of professional athletes. That's a big myth that the general population has. It's that, oh, those guys love training. They must. I mean, look at them. Look what they can do. No. So most of them will end their careers and drop off the wagon. They will never get back to forget maintaining where they were. They will never come even close to being in the type of shape they were while they were competing, because they had coaches and dietitians and everybody was working with them. They had their field work. They had everything planned for them by other people like me. And when they dropped off because to them it was a job. To them, some of them never want to see a football, never want to lift a weight. This is very, very true. It's a problem with high-level athletes because they get burnt out. They had to take it so seriously because they had an $8 million contract that said, you must perform or we will cut you. You must reach this in order to get this. And so they did it. But again, I know that's a long-winded answer to your question.
No.
I think the people that really exhibit the type of energy that I like to see, again, I don't know that the word hero fits, but are the people who really take this seriously and enjoy the training, the physicality for themselves. Not for other people, not for money, not for a job. They do it for themselves. And that's the sort of mentality I like to instill on the people I work with, is that this should not be something. I had a client just last week. He trained for 4 months, and he did get in better shape than he was when he started. Then he went on vacation, and when he came back, he was super bummed out. And I'm like, what's? And he told me, he's like, man, I tell you, I mean, I haven't seen half the members of my family in over a year. No one there even made a single comment about how great a shape I've gotten in. No one said anything. And I mean, look, I get it. I get why that would be a bit of a bummer. But I told him, like, well, hey, man, I mean, that's not why we're in here. It's if they notice it, great, but that's not why you're doing this. You got to do this for you. If you notice that you're in better shape, that's all that matters. Nobody else's opinion should even be valid in this argument. So that's what I try to lean in toward.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, I think, especially being a home gym owner, it's a internal motivation thing, since I'm on my own down here, and you can do coaching, things like that. But I just mean 90% of the time I'm walking into my home gym, and you've got to have that reason why for yourself.
Oh, certainly.
That speaks to me. So it makes sense to me. Now, that had to be quite a shift, if you will, going from elite athletes to general public, as well as having a facility that you're working at instead of a facility now that you are an owner of. So what have been some of the challenges in this time that you've had Strict Vision Athletics?
Mm. Certainly there was a shift. Because my facility here, first of all, the shift was definitely gradual. Like I said, I was with Ian for 4 years, so I had time to plan, and there were certainly challenges. I mean, I got my real estate license early on, so I could make enough money to buy a house, to get a down
Yeah.
payment and get something. The early on trials that I went through, certainly the business side of it, that's something that my internship did not help with, that I had no background in. I studied kinesiology. I did not study business. I did
Yeah.
not study finance or know anything about any of that. That really came early on from my brother. That was the partnership, and the reason why the partnership between us was so strong, because
Hmm.
he did have a background in that. He understood how to balance a monthly budget, like
Yeah.
what a CPA needs to see. Like, all of the business and marketing and content early on came from him. And my
Oh, cool.
collaborations with him have carried on until today. He and I are
Yeah.
sort of diverging, but he helped me in the early years, definitely, with that. A learning curve that would have been very hard for me to accomplish on my own, while still operating as a full-time coach, also trying to learn how to do the business expansion. Those are two very
Yeah.
hard goals to simultaneously do.
That's a match made in heaven, then.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. Sometimes you look back and things seem sort of serendipitous, like this was meant to happen. So it
Mm-hmm.
sounds like it just gelled, it came together, and some of the spots that I don't want to call it a weakness, but some of the things that you didn't really have to bring to the table, your brother had in terms of a skill set. So what about now? When I look at your content and I see what you're putting out there, I learn a lot, but I'm also entertained. And one of the things that I'm pretty sure anyone who follows you, and I'll drop all the links and everything in the description, by the way, listeners. So if you don't follow Brandon and Strict Vision Athletics, you can. But you'll notice pretty quickly that very frequently there's a song that comes on and you post a reel and da 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 da, and you kind of dance around your gym, and I don't give a shit. So, what? Since it's my personal favorite, in terms of stuff that you post, I gotta ask, like, where did that start? Because now I don't even know how many you've made. Do you know how many
Oh
of
yeah.
those you've made?
I don't. Probably, I don't know. At least 50. At least 50.
I would say
Now,
so. I mean,
yeah, and that's a good example of the type of thing that I was referring to. The content side, the marketing side, understanding understanding social media is something that it really is a full-time job. Like,
oh,
understanding how to properly run. If you are actually trying to eat off Instagram, it is no longer something that can be sort of a let's dabble in it and test it and see if it. No, in order to make your name on social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, you are going to need at least one person fully dedicated to doing that. And that's what Eli's role was. That
okay.
soundbite is an example of a TikTok strategy that we noticed early on was really, really taking off. And it took off organically in the beginning, but especially now, because we've done over, I want to say over 200 different collaborations at this point with equipment manufacturers, people in the
Mm-hmm.
industry, really anybody who makes anything, fitness or comic related. I've done stuff with artists who have sent me things, but
Yeah.
primarily for us, our collaborations are with equipment manufacturers. The Stepper Pro
Yeah.
X is coming here in about 25 minutes, so that's a good
Nice.
example. Yeah, that'll be fun. Um, that soundbite is one of many that we have learned our audience gravitates toward. And even if you did everything right and you had your marketing strategy and you had something that was really clickbaity and you've got all the training and all your core principles are laid out, even then you're going to have to, if marketing on social media is your goal, learn to pivot and learn to
Mm.
accept what the algorithm is launching for you. Every time we do that soundbite, what I do now is a collaboration between myself and an equipment manufacturer like Torque. So Torque
Okay.
Fitness just sent us their Relentless Ripper, and I everything now is very structured. I tell them at the beginning, exactly what it is I'm going to do over 120 days. I tell them, like, look, I'm going to give you these pieces of promotional material. Here are the analytics on the last 51 times we ran it. Here are the number of times people clicked
Nice.
it. Do you want to do it? Yes or no? And unless this, I understand how this sounds, but unless the equipment manufacturer has absolutely no idea what they're doing, they will almost always say yes today. It was not the case for a very long time, but today, in order to reach an audience like one post of ours will reach, you are probably going to have to drop, let's just say, maybe between $500 to $1,500 worth of marketing costs to reach that number of eyes if you were to try to do it on your own page. If Torque Fitness tried to do a post and tried to reach 187,000 people with one post, they would have to pay $1,500 in order to get Instagram to agree to do that. So they can do it that way, or I can say to them, hey, listen, we have a very unique way we do this. It's a seamless and shameless plug. That's why that soundbite does so well. It does so well because it's not an ad, but it does run like an ad. People see exactly what it is we're promoting. They see us use the product. They hear it. It's funny. It's catchy. And it does really, really well. That's why we keep using it.
I mean, it makes sense to me because it drew me in, and then it's recognizable. So the next time I see you posting, I'm like, oh, I know what's happening. Like he's moving all weird, and I hear the music. Oh, there's Eli. Like
and it's
cameos.
associated with something new. That's the thing too. When you nurture your audience comes to expect, like, oh, he's doing it again. What is it? They gravitate toward it. They know every time I do that, it's something new. It's something they haven't seen before.
Absolutely. So then, what would you say? I mean, if you're imagining like a pie chart, you've got your clients, your training, you've got the facility you're running, but now you've also got this online presence. You're working, collaborating with companies. Is that just for solely to have separate revenue or gain more equipment for the facility? I mean, what's the divide between your time and between your efforts, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Well, I think it's both. To answer your first question, I mean, collaboration as a word is probably the most valuable lesson that any entrepreneur can really learn. And I don't really think, because first of all, in order to make collaborations work for anyone, you have to have a mindset that's set up for collaboration. Most people are competitive. Most people see competition rather than collaboration. That's why I love podcasting. Podcasting to me is, in its purest form, a collaboration, a dialogue. You are agreeing to have a discussion with me. I am agreeing to have a discussion with you. It's free. There's no money. We're going to create something together, and then we're going to give it to both of our audiences. That's collaboration. And that word, if you have the mindset for that, it will take you further than you could ever imagine. We have not bought a piece of equipment in almost 3 years. So every single thing that we show is only through our collaborators. And again, that serves, as I mentioned a second ago, that definitely serves more than one purpose. Yes. I mean, it gets equipment in here that otherwise would have cost hundreds of millions. We have we have roughly, I'd say 1.2. We have roughly $1.2 million worth of stuff in here. That did not happen by purchasing that equipment. That happened through collaboration. And if you have the understanding on what it is that you can do and how it is you're going to do it, that is going to certainly be a benefit for a home gym owner. If you are running your company as much more than a in-person training, you're running it as a media company, and that's where we've been and where we're going. To answer the futuristic part of your question, my time is still and will always be dedicated toward in-person training in some way. Big goals for me, for this company, things I would like to see. I would love to see a partnership with Marvel. I would love to see the actors coming here for interviews, for working out, for, pre-releases for the films, well, you name it. Whatever that ends up being, that's a goal for us. We have a mobile app that we're designing right now that's going to be a membership-based, movement with Blatantly Blair. She's another awesome trainer out in California. We're going to make that together. That's collaboration. There's a huge amount of online revenue to be pulled that we have still yet to tap into. I see myself always doing the in-person stuff, in-person training. Eventually, I see myself training for free. Eventually, if things go the way they should, it would be this facility most likely if the things that I want to manifest do come true, this facility will be by invite only and training will be free. But I'll be
Interesting. Okay.
training, so somebody like Matt Winning, or I'll be or Wes Welker, or any number of high profile clients, athletes, that sort of a person. That's who I want to work with long term.
Interesting. Yeah, I think having the goal of getting to the point financially that you can train who you want to train for free is quite a goal. And there's probably a lot of trainers out there that are listening that think, that's a tough one to think through, but it's getting the person and the people that you want.
Louis Simmons did it
in your gym. Exactly.
Yeah. And, there's a way to do it. You just have
to
have a diverse portfolio. You have to have different markets running. And you have to make sure that whatever it is that you're bringing to the table in those markets is quality. It has to be. Oh. And that's what we're doing right now.
Louis had books, VHS tapes, equipment, you name it, T-shirts, eventually T-shirts. That used to be like a coveted thing, but now T-shirts. So, it makes sense, the varied revenue stream, because even with some of the modern equipment I bring into my gym, because I'm focused mainly on vintage, it's an angle of comparing to the vintage side of things. And then I get to add that to my gym. But I think you're in a unique position because you're not a traditional equipment reviewer per se. Like I've had Garage Gym Life on here. I just spoke with Coop from Garage Gym Reviews on my last episode or two. So you're not really a traditional reviewer, but you're offering something that's unique then by not being a traditional reviewer. So I think that's a marketable thing in itself, that you have this facility that then the equipment's going to be in that gets eyes on it. So I think you're in 100%. a really interesting position, and that's why I like to see where you're going with all of this. So before we sign off, though, I've got to dig into your history just a little bit here for a minute, if you'd indulge me. So you went all the way back to your teenage years, because that's when you started really working with things, interning and whatnot. But if you reach back even before that, you were saying how your family was very athletic and athletically oriented. Can you pinpoint, though, when did you really start working out for the sake of working out to being stronger? When did that begin for you? Like, my children wander down here and come in the gym and they're throwing dumbbells around, sometimes safe, sometimes not. So when did that happen for you?
Probably around the time I was 14 or 15. My dad had a series of Nautilus machines in his basement. Cool. Right around that time, and he was the first one. I had the guy who hooked me up with Ian. His name's Nathan Day. He hooked me up with sort of a ABC playbook on how to work out. I, like many of us at that age, I saw Pumping Iron. I loved Arnold. I thought lifting weights was so cool so early on. I knew I wanted to look like him, and my dad was a huge fan of Arnold too. So it was already kind of instilled in me. I watched the movie with him. I told him we need to get weights. And so, probably 14 or 15 is when I really started to make it like a routine part of my day. Like I started to, and that's what, again, the guy Nathan who got me in with the NFL, I remember him telling me early on, like, if you really want to forget looking like Arnold, like if you really want to see something from this, this can't be just a hobby that you do a couple times a week. You need to make this as routine for you as going to bed at night. You need to be, I'm waking up, I've got my, I'm in junior high at the time, so I've got school, I've got sports, whatever it is, but I'm going to lift weights. I'm going to lift weights every day. And even when this is something I also tell people who come to me with the dilemma of, not knowing what to do. I tell them, I'm like, listen, when I first started, I had no idea what I was doing for the first year and a half to 2 years. But I still went in and did it, and I still got results from it. You don't need to be, you don't need to have a master's in exercise science to understand how to just go in and lift weights. YouTube is there for everyone, and it's free. Go in there, go on YouTube and YouTube and search the top 10 movements for me to do this, or the top 10 ways for me to lift this. That's enough. You don't need anything more advanced than that. And if you do, there's so many resources you can go to get it.
That's so true. And I mean, I do it all the time myself. Even though I'm in my 40s, I still like trying new movements and trying new things. And usually I stop at YouTube. So yeah, it's there and it's a free source. So why not? Well, hey, Brandon, thank you so much for coming on Home Gym History. You have your own podcast, so listeners, get out there, check out Brandon's podcast. And is the official title of the podcast just Strict Vision Athletics? What's the title of the podcast?
Becoming the 1% podcast.
Becoming the 1%.
It's on YouTube.
You. So on YouTube, Becoming the 1% podcast. And then, of course, I'll drop the Instagram and the other socials down in the description. Anything else you want to mention? You have a big delivery coming up here this afternoon.
Yeah. The stair stepper will be here. Nothing really beyond that, man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. It's an awesome conversation. Always good to connect.
Hey, when the new Deadpool comes out, I'll be thinking of you. I hope you enjoy it.
Oh, yeah. We'll be doing a lot of content around that time.
All right. Thanks so much, man.